Hello, hello. Hey, everyone. We're going to get going here. So everyone have a seat, and we're going to start this amazing panel with these great panelists. My name is Mike Wolf. I'm excited to be here at the ReFed Summit. This is, I think, my second or third summit, and they were always great. And I thank the ReFed team for inviting me to moderate this panel. So we have three great panels to discuss how AI can help us better tackle food waste. And I want to get into the nitty gritty a bit and kind of talk about how we're really finding solutions. Most of us have gone from what is AI a couple years ago to using it and becoming prompt engineers, creating images, or maybe hiring people who are building AI products for your company. And I've seen and heard from a lot of food waste-centric technology platform companies that are leveraging AI in a real and interesting way. So I want to get into that today. But we will get into all this in the conversation. But I want to introduce my panelists really quick. To my immediate left, we have Rose Wang. You are with RMI. Should I call it do we go by Rocky Mountain Institute or just RMI for short?
I think RMI.
Okay, great. You guys, we had a great time chatting on Monday, hearing about your work, so I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. And we have Ignacio Ramirez, the Managing Director for Americas at Winnow. And we don't have Matt Lang at the end. We have Ash Harwood sitting in for Matthew, who got caught on a plane somewhere. So
yeah, it sounds like
yeah.
For 2 hours.
I think we need AI to solve the travel delay issue. That's what we really need. But I want to spend a little more time for context. When we have a full hour for a session, I really like to have the panelists give a little more description of what they're building, and so you have that context as we get into the more interactive conversation. So Rose, let's start with you. For the benefit of the audience, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and where you're working on at RMI.
Sure, thank you. I joined RMI about 3 years ago, and I'm a manager of data analytics. We have just formed a new initiative called Digital Innovation Lab, or D-Lab in short. And this new initiative focuses on building data products for RMI programs, and help the program teams launch data products that are emissions relevant. We have launched 2 data products so far. One is called OCI Plus, which visualizes oil and gas emissions across the life cycle of the oil and gas assets. And the second product is called Waste Map, which is very relevant to this conference. It's short for Waste Methane Assessment Platform. Wastemap.earth is a URL that you could visit. And that product focuses on visualizing the methane emissions from the landfills across the world, from both global perspective and also city level and site level perspective. We also have a decision support tool that helps decision makers make decisions on what if they do something different, like what if certain % of the waste goes to composting facilities or anaerobic digesters, what is their impact to the downstream landfill emissions? So I think that's a very useful feature for audience of this conference, and please let me know, reach out to me if you're interested to hear more about this product. Thank you.
Who are your key customers? Who are using your data?
For the waste map, I think we are actively engaging with municipalities, especially in the global south. We used a 2-pronged approach for waste map. One prong is the platform itself, which is like data visibility of emissions and awareness raising. And the second prong is the country deep dive work, where we have a team of subject matter experts go to, for example, Lagos in Nigeria, a city in Nigeria, talk to the waste management authorities and help them craft waste management strategies to reduce emissions. And they actively use our decision support tool to guide local decision making. So I think municipalities are a big audience group that we are targeting. And I think also the financial institutions like the multilateral banks who are interested in investing actual infrastructure projects on the ground, we could provide them with the knowledge needed to guide on project priority, for example, and where to invest, what kind of investment can reduce the waste emissions to the best, the money can help. So yeah, I think these 2 groups are the biggest audience.
Great. Ignacio, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and tell us a little bit about Winnow.
Yeah, so my name is Ignacio Ramirez. I'm the managing director for Wino in North America. I've worked in kitchens my entire life. I'm from southern Spain. I grew up in a little fisher town called Zara de los Atunes, so the concept of food waste didn't come to me till like very late in age, because I grew up in a place where the fisherman will knock on your door and give you the catch of the day, or you will buy the tomatoes that they produce for the farmer. So it was interesting to see it evolving as I started working in kitchens at a very early age. We know as a company that produces artificial intelligence tools to help chefs cut their food waste. We work with commercial kitchens. We help them track, measure, and cut their food waste in half by using computer vision. So we enable them to understand everything that is being thrown away and why, and make better decisions when it comes to production, training, procurement, everything. We're now live in about 85 countries and growing, and 2,700 kitchens. So we work with a lot of what we call food waste heroes, people out there and chefs out there that are really trying to take this challenge at heart.
And for those who haven't seen Winnow in action, it's a camera essentially. Mm-hmm. Part of it's a camera that sits over where the food waste is thrown out, and then it identifies very quickly what you're throwing out.
So yeah, just to tell in a bit simple way, it's a sort of tablet that has a camera underneath. The tablet is located on top of the bin. Every time you throw something away, the system takes a picture and identifies what it is. And there's a scale underneath that takes the weight. So we can see that you waste away 2 pounds of tomatoes, and those are full tomatoes, therefore it's likely that it's going to be inventory, or it's chopped tomatoes. It might be a trimming situation, it might be a cooked tomato. We pair that data together, so we have the image, the cost, and the weight, and that is the insights that are going to help you make those decisions and change that.
Yeah, and it's been growing like wildfire. We'll talk more about your wins and maybe the lessons learned at key customers like IKEA, which has been fun to watch. Ash, I think people may know a little bit about. Yeah, we have 3 microphones and 4 people. So I thought you're congratulating him on a great intro. People may know you with your work from Refed, but tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and your team.
Yeah, great, thanks. Hi, I'm Ash, for those of you who I haven't met. I'm the Vice President of Data and Insights. So for those of you, and I hope that many of you have seen our Insights engine, it is the platform that the Data and Insights team works on. We have a couple of our engineers and product folks sitting here worrying about what I'm going to say. So if you really think about what the Insights engine is, it's a tool that's designed to try to understand across the entire food system, which I think each of you or many of you are just working on one little section of the entire food system. And what we've tried to do is to actually measure that whole system, and not just the amount of stuff that goes to waste, but where it ends up, our destinations, the reasons for it. We also try to then take those estimates of the total amount of stuff and try to understand what that means in the context of our environment. So things like how many emissions, like what is the sort of the greenhouse gas impact of that food waste, water usage. A very compelling statistic is, I think last year we estimate that food waste utilized 22% of our entire fresh water. So that's like a mind-boggling number, in my opinion. So we first figure out what's happening in the system. We then, I think, and this is probably the most important thing we do, is we try to figure out what we can do about that. And that's this idea of solutions. It's the reason why we call this not just a food waste summit, but a food waste solution summit. And so we then go out and do a ton of research to try to figure out all of the possible things, and we are really short, and so part of our learning is listening to all of you and figuring out what we're missing in our solutions mix. And then trying to say, here are the things that we can do. Here's the best bang for your buck. If you're looking for doing this at cost, like if you're worrying about the cost of things, here's how you optimize that solution mix. If you're really just focused on pure emissions reductions or water reductions. And then what we do is we take that and we try to convert that into other actionable information, like the solution provider database. If you want to actually do the thing, how do you actually go out and do that? We have a lot of decision support tools. The impact calculator, to be able to calculate how much waste or the emissions of your own operations and to do some scenario planning. We are starting to take all of that data and those models and take them to large companies and basically say, put your waste data through the system and let's actually optimize based on the things that you're not doing yet. And so this is what our team does. Yeah.
That's great. And I've watched as the Refed data team and products team has really grown and just providing value to the community. I think it's fantastic work you guys are doing. So I always liked, I mean, it's maybe seems rudimentary, but I always like to do a little bit of AI 101 when we have these talks, because most of you maybe aren't AI scientists. I know I'm not. And so I think when you try to put into context what's happened over the past couple of years with generative AI and large language models versus what we've seen as a real revolution over the past decade around things like image recognition, kicked off by ImageNet and what Feifei did at Stanford, I think it's kind of nice to put some things into buckets. So, Rose, I don't know if you could talk a little bit about maybe some of the foundational AI we saw maybe over the past decade and compare it to what we're seeing now with large language models.
Yeah, so there are a lot of confusions about what is machine learning, what is deep learning, what is AI in general. And so I actually also looked at myself, along this journey to learn what are the differences between those terminologies or jargons. My understanding is AI is short for artificial intelligence, and it is to use machines to simulate humans' intelligence and help make decisions, make predictions, like mimicking a human's brain. And machine learning is considered a subset of an AI, where it's, there are algorithms that can help do predictive analysis using a training data set that is, train a machine to do that kind of prediction or thinking. While deep learning specifically uses, it's a subset of machine learning. It uses neural networks and layers of neural networks to do prediction. And one example of deep learning is computer vision, where they use neural networks to see whether this image is a cat or a dog, or image recognition, and it's applied in autonomous driving and various sectors in our life now. Well, the generative AI, it's very recent, and it becomes real. It's because people realize now if we feed the neural networks with large amounts of data, specifically text data, they call it large language model because it is like billions of data points fed into those models, and they can produce powerful results in terms of predicting the next words. And that's how, when you ask some questions in ChatGPT, it is predicting the next word for you as a sentence. So I think the biggest difference in terms of scale of generative AI is the amount of training data that is fed into the models that is empowering it to see the things that the world that has not been seen before, that the power that we can see now as answering questions, summarizing text, etc. So that's kind of my understanding of the general landscape of machine learning, deep learning, AI, and all that.
That's great. Ignacio, I think so much of the past 15 years we've seen the evolution of things like self-driving cars and stuff, and so much of that was based on computer vision. Mm-hmm. So you're really kind of using a lot of that technology with Winnow. Can you talk about the evolution of that and how that's progressed over the past couple of years?
When we started Winnow years ago, we always had the idea of using computer vision to solve the problem, right? The beginning was always what we had in mind. At the time, computer vision accuracy was lower than human beings, therefore automating the process was not as helpful because you were prone to have errors, you were prone to not be accurate enough. I think today we're at a level where computer vision is more likely to identify an object or an item better than a human being is. So we've seen a huge evolution, and it's going to keep growing. Like in our case, for example, we train our model with over 300 million pictures, and that changes every second and grows. And our model keeps getting better and better and better. I think we're also seen as a place where we are lowering the cost. Now, developing AI tools, it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And I think we're at a really, really, really interesting point, and that technology has come a very long way in that sense.
I have a question about Winnow understanding context. So one of the things I thought as I looked at your solution is it understands over a period of time how much tomatoes I'm throwing out, and so I can optimize my restaurant flow to that. But does it also take into account, maybe with AI, context of, hey, there's an event in town, Refed's in town, and so there's a surge of people coming to the city, or there's a weather pattern. Are you guys factoring that in?
We do. We actually, some of the metrics that we use and that we ask our clients to introduce is the number of guests that they have, the sales data, so we can pair with that kind of information. We have some clients that are asking us, and we're working with them on maybe introducing things like their guest mix, where the nationalities of the people that are attending their event, or let's say a resort in the Caribbean, what is my mix today versus in November, that might be telling me why I'm wasting one food more today than I'm wasting in September, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, definitely. That's.
Ash, I want to ask you this, but I also, Rose, I want to follow up because I think on our talks you talked about this a bit, but I think the way we're seeing generative AI used now is it's allowing us to basically do more natural human interface conversations with data sets. I know that with the Refed data services you provide, you're probably evaluating using something like ChatGPT or something like that, or some LLM to integrate and maybe provide insights on demand. Don't add a product to your poor team over there. How are you thinking about using generative AI maybe over time using around the Refed data products?
Yeah. So our space is very interesting, right? Like we're not Amazon or Netflix or Google Ads that have been collecting data since the dawn of data time, what was that, like 2007 at this point? And so they're really advanced in this. And our space is fairly new, right? Particularly when you're starting to use things and processes that are sort of new, right? And so the way that we're starting to think about how we do this is, before there was a lot of rules-based decisions, right? And part of that is because to tell a story about the food system, we need to go out. We're not a platform. We don't have behavior that we can collect information about people. We need to go out and talk to people and gather every single government data set that we can find. We work with companies to get a lot of that proprietary and confidential data that tells us what's happening in the supply chain, and then we anonymize it, and that's how we tell our story. But a lot of that data processing is based on human decisions and understanding, which is a very good thing. But we see a lot of opportunity, really with the more traditional methods, to start helping to augment those kinds of decisions, the inputs into our model, right? If we don't have a measurement about this particular thing, how can we use measurement that we have about something else to make a prediction about the thing that we do not know? Now, what we are now looking at with generative AI, I mean, the reality is it helps us in our daily lives a lot. I love it when I'm actually working on a model. It's a great way of thinking through something. My favorite way to actually work on a strategy is to go take my dog for a walk and just dictate stuff into ChatGPT and then basically use that to write my first draft. And it's just, I think better when I'm around trees. So, but I also think there's an opportunity. A lot of our information is unstructured text. It's in case studies. It's in statements by people who know things, right? It's in academic literature. And it's really hard to read those things. I don't know if you tried. I was trying to read this economics food waste paper, and I have no idea what they're talking about. And this is where these tools can really come into play. They can help us understand these things. You can basically take these sort of like generalized models and feed them a bunch of stuff and basically change the context so that it can do a lot better job of actually helping you somebody who's not an expert parse that information. And that to me is, actually I think that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. It's, you can go on ChatGPT and make a custom GPT. You can only upload 10 articles, so you're kind of limited doing it that way, but there are a lot of opportunities right now.
And I think part of the challenge with generative AI is it's hallucination problem. And so, Rose, when we were talking a bit earlier on, I asked you, how do you give the proper domain knowledge to a generative AI so it doesn't hallucinate around really important topics? If you're talking about food waste or medical care, you don't want hallucination, you want accurate answers. And so you are starting to think about that because you guys publish a lot of great research on methane gas around landfills. How are you starting to train LLMs to be smarter about that?
Yeah, so we are building something like along the line that Ash mentioned. How do we get the insights or the knowledge nuggets from those very lengthy reports and get to the user in a more efficient way? In the sense, it's a Q&A chatbot or an AI assistant that you ask something, it comes back to you with the right answer, not just the right answer, but a reference to the original document where it is from. So we are building something called, we're using a method called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG in short, that will that we feed a bunch of documents, you know, for example, my reports or blogs to the AI model, which is basically OpenAI's API. But then it is actually retrieving the answer from those relevant documents instead of from its original training data. So that reduces the possibility of hallucination because it not only looking for information that is within the context that you provide to it, the document library, but also you can specify the system message to AI saying that if you don't know about it, you just say I don't know. You don't make up something. That's kind of like system message prompt that you could give to the AI as a system message. That reduces hallucination as well. It's a technique for reducing hallucination. So that's the kind of way we're experimenting, and we want to hopefully integrate into our data products so that it's easier for users to access those knowledge nuggets in a think tank.
Great. By the way, I do want to take questions from the audience, so I'm going to do that in about 10-15 minutes, so just start thinking, get the brains churning. I want to talk about applications and how application of AI is starting to actually deliver real-world results. And Ignacio, you guys have it sounds like, how many countries are you guys in? It's amazing. He wants to shake your hand.
85.
85, that's great traction you guys are getting. And so the data sets and the real world wins are piling up. I know that the case study around IKEA delivering real world food waste reduction is pretty well documented, but can you talk about that and maybe some other wins where you've seen the Winnow product actually deliver results?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we work with over 2,700 kitchens, 85 countries. IKEA is a huge example for us because it's also a great example of what a company can achieve when they have the right drive, right? They were one of the first companies, or the first company to actually achieve their waste reduction target, and they're saving, I think it's about $37 million per year on food waste, which is pretty impressive. But we work with a wide variety of companies out there. We work with caterers, we work with ISS Guggenheimer here, for example. We deploy with them in multiple sites. They're achieving the reduction targets as well. We work with hotels. Hilton is a great example where we see a lot of initiatives where they're trying new things, like they're using our data in the Middle East to right-size the croissants. So they're doing things like they've been analyzing food waste at breakfast in 13 properties in the UAE and in the Middle East, and they've been trying to right-size the croissant portion, which is an interesting thing because croissants is something that you typically buy from your supplier that's already like a pre-size and you can choose, and now a company going back to those providers and saying, well, we actually think you should produce croissants of this weight and this size because this is what our clients are demanding. So we have a lot of success stories out there. Anywhere the food is produced in advance, anywhere where you see a commercial kitchen is somewhere where we can help them cut their food waste in half. And yeah, I could talk the entire day about this, sorry.
AI is right-sizing croissants. Okay, that's great.
It's right-sizing croissants, yeah. I just want to say one thing, because we're talking about generative AI, and I'm sorry that I'm going to use it. I want to be very clear. For us, it's still really important, the human level and the human interaction. I think kitchens are places where you need to feel and understand the situations. They're stressful places. I don't want to, it's not that we don't want to do it. I think generative AI is going to help, and it's helping us as well, and it's going to help our clients. But I don't want to remove the role that, in our case, our customer success team has. That is coaching those chefs, coaching those production managers, and help them understand what's going on.
Yeah, so much of the AI now is around optimizing operations and decision support tools. And so, Rose, I think you guys are looking at adding some additional features over time. I think you guys are using Meta's AI model to maybe improve your methane analysis from space a little bit, or am I got that wrong? Can you talk a little bit about ways you are using AI, or you will be using AI in the future to improve the accuracy of your methane tools, methane analysis tools?
Yeah, so for the time being, we are using AI, especially computer vision. What we are trying to do is to analyze satellite imageries of landfills and try to draw a boundary of the landfills so that we not only know where the landfills are, but also know what is the rough size of the landfill, which will be important for getting to the estimation of emissions and also getting to attribute the plumes that are going to be observed by a lot of methane point source satellites, like Carbon Mapper and MethaneSat, for example. They all will see plumes that are pinpointed to a specific location on the Earth. But a lot of times we don't know whether that plume is from an oil and gas leakage, or it's from a landfill or agriculture sector. So we need to have a good on-the-ground infrastructure layer to be able to attribute those plumes to those specific sectors and even the assets and equipments. So what we are trying to do for the using satellite imageries is to first draw the boundaries of the landfills so that we can create, we call it polygons for the landfills, that we can potentially just do automatic plume attribution. And the purpose of attributing the plumes is, I think it's quite obvious. We want to know what is the, for example, if it's every plume is a snapshot. It's a snapshot of that particular emission. But if we want to know what is the annual emission rate from this landfill, we need to have a series of snapshots that happen on this landfill. So being able to automatically attributing those plumes to that specific landfill will help us build the profile of those landfill emission over time.
Ash, I try to characterize, and I maybe didn't do a great job of how AI is being used today around decision support, kind of playing off of Ignacio's comment about we don't want to replace people. You're probably thinking a lot as I think a technologist about the implications of AI and what it can do around helping us do our jobs better. What are your thoughts as we look towards the future and build AI tools in this space of reducing food waste? What are some of the ways in which you think it can help us over time?
It's kind of how do I describe this? Right now, I think in our space, most of it is decision support tools. It's embedded in a system. I think some of it sounds like Winnow is doing a lot of this is basically demand forecasting, right? But at the end of the day, it's not a machine putting the croissant in the oven, is it? Right? It's
not yet.
At the Smart Kitchen Summit, we did see some of that stuff starting to happen, and there might be an opportunity or a moment where that happens. But for the most part, right now, at scale, it's still a human. At your Food AI conference last year, we met Strella, which was basically optimizing the ripening of bananas. I found this super interesting, right? And so they had to go out and collect all of this information about the characteristics of a banana and how it ripens. They needed to then build a piece of hardware to collect that information. And then they needed to basically make all these predictions, and then they had to this was like one of the most fascinating things, this ripening room, and there's a person who is the
ripening guy.
ripeninger. Like literally, this is a
ripening room guy.
trained skill position. And then they have to deliver that insight to that person. But at the end of the day, that person is going to say, okay, I'm now going to carry this pallet of bananas out and put it on the thing. So I think that this is where we're seeing a lot of this stuff. Very few people who are selling AI products actually publish their accuracy rates, like how good they actually are. And that's actually where I came across Winnow, is you actually published an accuracy rate in 2018, which was pretty good for 2018 too. I mean, it was really, really impressive. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity, but I think part of it is actually starting to see, I mean, I'm kind of a nerd, so I actually want to see like the actual metrics that they're using to evaluate stuff, but starting to see some of these cost savings and starting to really see where we are seeing big impact, because there is, part of it is this shiny object. I love shiny objects. I think that shiny objects are really helpful to get people excited to try to drive capital investment, but there is a moment in time where we really need to make investments in the things that are the most promising. We have to have those people on the edge who are pushing it and trying the new stuff, but right now we're also looking for scalable things. Was that kind of a non-answer?
No, it's good. On the Strela, yeah, I found it fascinating. There's the ripening room guy, and it reminded me of Moneyball before they brought sabermetrics. Like, it's him just kind of, I've been doing this for 20 years and the bananas are ripe now. But you give him this AI tool that can help him do his job better. So it doesn't replace the ripening guy if he's willing to adapt, right? So,
and maybe the last thing to note is it doesn't work for all fruits. Each item of produce, I think the CEO even said that, like, depending on what type of mango or avocado, it will have its own model. It'll have its own ripening thing. So for everything that they do, they have to go out and build a new model. They have to go and collect that information, train it. I mean, the fun statistic is 80% of a data scientist's job is just collecting data and making it useful. Like, once you train a model, I mean, you need compute and stuff, but there is a ton of labor involved. You know, you have to get all that stuff labeled. It's a big investment.
let's talk about that. So we hear a lot about training of models. We hear stories about how, OpenAI is licensing Reddit data and getting crazy answers and wrong answers. New York Times is suing OpenAI because they don't want to be crawled and have all their data sucked into the Borg. So, but Ignacio, you guys, there's a big world of food image data that needs to be processed. Mm-hmm. Talk about that. Have we exhausted that, or do you have enough training data to really kind of make Winnow better and better? Because you have all these systems in place. Is that your training data now?
We keep training every day, and the model gets better, and then suddenly it gets slightly worse, and then you panic, and then, why is it getting worse? Well, now we have these many types of rice, and now we have these many other types of rice that look very similar, for example, right? Just using an example, we have maybe paella in Spain, and you only had paella, but suddenly you have a type of rice that is cooked in the Middle East that is very similar, and you're like, wait, what is happening here? We keep constantly training it. I know we're at a very good place today. We can identify thousands of dishes all over the place, from Asia, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, everywhere. But I think it's always an improvement. It's always something that we're gonna keep working on and keeps getting better day by day.
Matthew arrived on his plane. Amazing.
Whoa, wow.
Matthew, you could come on up and join. Let's do 4 panelists if we want, or I'll stand up here. As I kick my water over. Is that food waste?
It's just water, I think. Well, it's not just water. Let's be very careful what we say.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Hello? Oh, wow. That's loud.
Hey, made it.
Matthew, for those who don't know you and IC Foods, tell us quickly a couple-minute introduction.
Sure. So I lead an organization called IC Foods. That's an acronym for International Center for Food, Ontology, Operability, Data, and Semantics. There's one word in there that most people probably don't know, which is ontology. And ontologies are computable vocabularies. So that word comes from philosophy and anthropology, where it was used to describe people's worldview. Computational scientists grabbed onto that in the 1980s and said, we can compute over that if we have the right vocabularies and the relationships between concepts. So our mission as an organization is to build an internet of food, and specifically a semantic web of food. And that semantic web is essentially created by these vocabularies of concepts and their relationships to each other, and then instances of those concepts. And we use artificial intelligence, machine learning, to anneal those data instances to these concepts so that we can create this interconnected knowledge graph about food.
Great. And I think we'll have time maybe after if people want to walk up to you and ask you deeper dives. But I do want to follow up a question on that. I've been following IC Foods for a while, and this idea of creating a data ontology around food is really interesting to me. How has that changed? I thought initially it'd be a lot of humans maybe labeling stuff, but has AI essentially kind of replaced those humans? Can you use data to create the categories and the ontologies?
Right.
Or, I mean, AI to create the data and the
yeah. So that's a big area of research right now that we are working on. We're part of a NSF AI institute called Icicle. I was very happy when they came up with the name Icicle, because now we're IC Foods with Icicle inside. But we're using large language models to help us generate these ontologies. And it's much faster. So the technical definition of an ontology is an explicit specification of a shared conceptualization, right? And so that's what these vocabularies become. And getting people in a room to try to come up with these words de novo is time consuming, it's difficult, it costs a lot of labor for all the people in the room. And large language models, and actually leveraging their ability to hallucinate, to come up with things that maybe people haven't thought of, is actually a really good way to do this.
Talk a little bit about, I want to ask you more questions, then we're going to go to the audience. I'm just doing my Matthew questions. So
appreciate that.
You were absent for the first part of class.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. The bus broke down.
Can you futurecast a little bit and where you see AI helping us reduce food waste in the system? What are some of the ways you see large language models being applied to food waste reduction?
Yeah, right now I think we've got sort of these big buckets of food waste that we know about, but we haven't really been able to sort of drill down to specifics all across the food system. And I think that ontologies and ontologizing food waste in particular and then instantiating those ontologies with actual data is going to help us really learn where we can intervene, what those priorities should be in terms of dollars wasted or labor wasted or greenhouse gas emissions or you name it.
Great. There's a microphone there. I thought I'd have to run around with the microphone. I'm aging myself like Phil Donahue. But if you have a question, raise your hand. I can maybe run a mic out to you. Let me do it. Can you guys share a mic? Yeah. I'm going to be Phil Donahue.
I have a question on naming convention standards, taxonomy, and I think it's interesting because I know as Food Maven was on the board, and they're doing such a good job of creating normalization classification engines to kind of bring in these taxonomy or level set the taxonomy standards. What is your thought on making a global standard universal? Because I feel like that's such an important part of, we're doing all this work on AI and it's amazing and I think it's important, but wouldn't it make sense if, the 700 of us that come together demand that there is some type of the G10 standard is there, it's just not accepted in many parts. I'm from the protein industry, and what Tyson uses and what Cisco uses and Cargill are completely different. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's the movement towards that shift? Because I feel like that's where I think effort should be put. I think AI is incredible and it's going to be an amazing tool, but let's standardize. Let's come together and standardize.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We see this standardization as something that's necessary, especially for entrepreneurs, so that entrepreneurs, startups, can have a standard to build against. It's essentially the roads, right? We're talking about building the roads. And the very large organizations, they've built kind of their own roads, you know? But the smaller startups, we don't have the roads for them to follow. So one of the things that we're doing is we are a voting member of the now forming ISO U.S. delegation for its TGC 347, or a TAG 347, which is all about the ISO data standards for digitizing essentially the agricultural supply chain from production to consumption. And there will be many, many working groups that come out of that. But absolutely, I think that standardizing the semantics, the words that we use, whether it's an ontology or a taxonomy or some kind of controlled vocabulary, it's going to be fundamental for encouraging new business and entrepreneurship. And I think it can't be understated.
Hi. I'm wondering if you're seeing any examples of utilizing AI to connect the dots between procurement data, inventory management, menu management, and waste. All of those data systems exist in variable states of excellence, if you will, and some of them are decentralized, but any cases where you're seeing them all connected and then using AI to inform better decisions upstream.
Who was that for? Is it for me?
Anybody who's comfortable answering the question or not.
I think that I think a fresh is a good example, or an example that we hear about often. I know that there's other ones. It might be worth noting one of the challenges related is, legacy computer systems, keeping your inventories up to date at the beginning, basically building your technology so it can actually plug into another service rather than having to go out and build a system on top of it. These are, in order for all those things to work, you need to have all of that integration. And I think we're starting to see more of that. But that true sort of entire pipeline that you just described, I don't think is there, would be there just because we just don't have all that stuff, but it is changing.
Yeah, I was going to say I wouldn't have an example of a client, and it's something that comes up quite a bit, but it's the integration part that is the challenge part. And sometimes it's just not integrating a tool, but also some of the tools that you just described are not even integrated with each other. I think that would be the perfect system and the perfect solution, and I hope to see that relatively soon. But I haven't seen it yet with any of my clients.
Thank you. So I think what you described, Matthew, would be the foundation for what the audience was asking about, without a standardized way of how we call something, right? Call this process as, for example, cheese production or apple production. We won't be able to have a standardized data format. And I think on top of ontology, we also need a standard data format that can pass the data along, and also the willingness of the actors, the stakeholders, to share those data to the upstream and downstream of the supply chain partners. So it's not only in the food sector, but across the whole supply chain. We need that kind of interoperability of the data to enable that kind of trace and tracking for Scope 3 emissions, for example. Now Scope 3 emissions is only based on emission factors that were decades old, and are even, sometimes it's not relevant for that particular product. But in order to do those, supply chain tracking and tracing, we need a lot of foundational work to make those data more interoperable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that there's lessons to be learned here from the healthcare industry and from drug development industry. Both of those, which are loosely coupled, but when a pharmaceutical company or a biotech company wants to do a new drug investigation, the development of that happens in concert with doing clinical trials and the healthcare system and finding patient populations. It's all pretty tightly, but there's a lot of ontology in that work, and as it happens, and the reason ontology is essentially our middle name is because you can actually create data models. If your ontologies are constructed well, you can create data models from your ontologies. So we really see that as foundational.
We have, I think, at least 3 questions that I've identified. You go first, and let's try to get all 3 and go, sir.
Yeah, Feng Mingan with MetaFoodX, we are also similarly working on the solution to help manual cycle-based tracking of individual consumption and then use that to forecast. So what we believe in from a practical point of view, one is, of course, computer vision, as the panel covered, and also the predictive analytics, right, plus automation. We feel that's where most of the things can begin for helping the waste and food operation. So I wonder how the panel feels, right? Because right now, the LLM model application is a little bit too far, and it does very little to the current operation. I just want to hear what the panel think.
Anyone?
Sorry, for me, I didn't understand the question. That's why I didn't. Sorry, you can get that.
So basically, LLM, right, mostly generation understanding of the language-based thing. So for us, for the food waste, the biggest buck in terms of return on investment, is it on practical application of the predictive analytics and the CV versus just looking for a large language model native application? Which one is more reasonable?
I mean, I think one of them is kind of like easier in the short term, but I think that looking for the large language model will have a deeper application in the end. I think that's what we're aiming for. That would be my answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, right now, I think machine learning, if you have the trained data sets, if you have that ground truth, that's really important, like the truth, and then the one I would say is kind of Amazon. If you buy ketchup and mustard, they have a lot of customers who are all buying ketchup and mustard, and that person also buys relish. So it will then say to you, okay, well, we know that probability-wise, if you're buying these 2 things, you buy this other thing. So I think that is really tried and standard. We're just taking that kind of forecasting and prediction that's been done in a bunch of places and applying it to our space. I think that the generative stuff really comes to the unstructured information, right? And probably kind of like the ontologies, providing the inputs to these more sort of, so weird to say, like the more traditional models and algorithms that are then producing that kind of stuff. But the other thing that maybe is related is we work with stuff, right? Like food, it's like things have to be carried from point A to point B. We also need a lot of hardware, right? You need like trackers and sensors and barcodes. You need humans to scan things or enter things. This is like, I think that this area is ripe for innovation. Is if you can figure out how to get that data set, you will be the Google of this space, because that's how Google got its sort of start, is they got all this data, and that gave them essentially a monopoly on search. And so, anyways.
Yep. Next question.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jake Simon with Connected Fresh. We are not the Google of this space yet, but that is exactly what we are focused on, is the data, pulling the data. So first of all, love the conversations around the integrations. I think that's the massively important picture here, longer term. I'm wondering, what are some of the types of the most common barriers to entry for this are you hearing from potential customers? And for lack of a better term, how legitimate or founded are those in today's solutions?
I can speak to that, yeah. I think for our clients, first of all, they perceive AI and anything related to AI as something way more complicated than it really is. They think it's going to be difficult to adopt. Sometimes they think that the investment is going to be huge when it's not there. I think that would be the biggest one. There's kind of a sense sometimes of, I don't want to say mistrust, but people they perceive it as sometimes as like not a tool that's going to help them, but more like a tool that's going to monitor them and spy on them or things like that. I think the fact that they believe that it's way more complicated than it is the biggest barrier for us. Like we need to explain, it's very simple, you just need to do your job the same way that you were doing it before, but now we're going to be able to tell you what you're wasting and why. You just need a power plug and an internet connection and drill this to the world. Like simplifying it is one of the keys to it. I think there's a lot to do in terms of educating everyone on what AI really is and what these tools are here to do for you, and kind of like removing the fear that AI is going to replace us. And I know people maybe in this room don't feel that way, but I get that question sometimes, right? And I can tell it's going to be a long time till we can really actually remove a chef or people from the kitchen. That's just not going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, that would be the biggest one for us.
Next question.
Yeah, thank you so much for this discussion. So I work in methane accounting, and we use a large language model to basically align food bank data with USDA data. While kind of building out that model, it became really clear kind of how important the initial dictionaries or the initial data is. So my question to you is there new data or new data practices you all are excited for to help improve your models down the line?
Sorry, could you repeat the last sentence again?
Yeah. Are there kind of new data or new data practices you're looking forward to that could help improve the models you're working on?
You mean new?
Yeah. So for us, it's about how you collect it, and also we've been talking about standardization of the data model. Super wonky. I don't know how. Imagine a spreadsheet. Basically, that's sort of, you have columns and rows. That's one way of thinking about it. But, the Pacific Coast Food Waste Collaborative, you saw Dana present the reduction overall, that estimate. So what we're able to do from that is we have a standardized methodology about how they calculate that information, like that shrink rate, those destinations, all that kind of stuff. We can then take that, what was previously confidential, it was seen as a competitive advantage, anonymize that, provide value back to them in the form of benchmarks, this kind of being able to pass their individual data through our custom roadmap stuff. And then it gives us this massive insight to serve the public good, right? Because now we can, once again, lots of secret sauce, lots of fairy dust, lots of assumptions. This is the reality in an imperfect world. But in my mind, this is these pre-competitive collaborations that unlock all of this information that is really decentralized.
We have time for one more quick question.
Okay.
Yep.
Great panel, so thank you. In thinking, when there's new technology, it often leads to new business model innovation. And in thinking about food waste, it feels like all businesses and even homes and restaurants have a fear of running out. And so there's just an over of everything, a fear of running out. I guess my question is, do you see any where there might be business model innovation that the way we do things will just be different because we're going to have just better information?
Yeah, I want to try that. Yeah. So I'm not sure whether you've heard about the concept called just-in-time, JIT, I think it's from Japanese manufacturing industry, to reduce inventory, extra inventory stocking, to make sure, the operation, sometimes we don't need that much redundancy in the system, and a lot of the redundancy equals waste to some extent. So optimization using Windows technology, for example, could help reduce those redundancy. But I also, your question sparks a thought whether there is a business model where to help people alleviate those fear of lack of redundancy, where maybe a company could be there just to provide those extra safety net for companies for the extra inventory stock if they, eventually the models don't work for some reason and they run out of stock. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think, the one thing that sort of separates food from, most of the rest of the supply, other things that we move around, is perishability. And so I mentioned earlier that, we're, building standards for an Internet of Food or semantic web of food, but also for IoT for food, right? So Internet of Things for devices that can report on where that food is, what state it's in. And so, I think we're seeing all kinds of new sensors, including aroma sensors that can just tell when something's off-gassing. So I think that in order for us to do some of this sort of just-in-time with food better, we need more data about what's happening to that food as it's moving through the system. And I think sensors are going to be a big role there.
All right, that's all the time we have. Before I tell you to give these guys a big round of applause, I'm told I have to tell you, we are at lunch. Lunch is from 12 to 1:30 in Ballroom 1. You guys okay with chatting with people as they come up? So they're going to hang out a little bit. If you guys have a question for them that you didn't get to, you want to come up and hand a business card to them, do that. But let's give them a big round of applause.
Wait, you guys pulled off. I forgot that you were going to ask for the microphone.